The days that followed seemed to blur into one another, as if she had slipped into my life so naturally that I couldn't remember what it was like without her. At first, it felt harmless, even comforting, to have someone so attentive, so present. She called when she knew I was tired, sent me messages that felt like tiny sparks in my otherwise quiet evenings, and showed up when I least expected it, always with some small excuse that never truly explained why she was there. The truth was, I had stopped questioning it. A part of me had grown addicted to her presence, to the way she seemed to carry warmth into every space she entered, even though there were moments when her warmth felt rehearsed, like a line she had memorized. But I let myself ignore those moments, because her attention felt like oxygen, and I had been suffocating for far too long. She wanted to know me, or at least that's how it seemed. She asked me questions that made me pause, questions that peeled back layers I had kept hidden from the world. She wanted to know what my first heartbreak felt like, how it shaped the way I loved, whether I still carried the weight of that pain in the way I walked through life. She wanted to know about the nights I cried myself to sleep, about the dreams I abandoned because no one believed in me, about the pieces of myself I thought were too broken to share. And I told her. I told her things I had never said out loud. I gave her fragments of my heart that had been locked away, thinking she was carefully holding them, protecting them. She looked at me like I was a mystery she wanted to solve, a book she couldn't put down. And every time she smiled at me, I felt the chains of my loneliness loosen a little more. Yet even in those moments of closeness, there were shadows I couldn't ignore. Sometimes, when she thought I wasn't looking, her face would harden. Her eyes would drift away, distant, as though she wasn't really with me. Other times, her laughter came too easily, as though it was designed to distract me from noticing what she wasn't saying. Once, I caught her looking at me with an expression that didn't feel like affection at all. It felt like calculation, like she was studying me for a reason I couldn't understand. I should have listened to that instinct, but instead, I convinced myself it was my fear talking, the old fear of being hurt again. I reminded myself that she had been nothing but kind, nothing but gentle. So I silenced the doubt, even though it pressed against me like a warning I wasn't ready to hear. As weeks passed, we fell into rhythms that felt too much like love to deny. We shared morning coffee runs that turned into hours of talking, evenings where she cooked in my kitchen like she had been there all along, late nights when we stayed on the phone until sleep blurred our voices. She became the first person I thought of when I woke up and the last person I thought of before I closed my eyes. Every detail of her became a part of my day, the way she teased me when I was serious, the way her eyes softened when I spoke about something painful, the way she leaned closer when I tried to pull away. It felt like she had been designed to fit into the cracks of my life, to slide perfectly into the spaces I didn't even know were emptied. I remember the first time she reached for my hand without hesitation. We were walking along a dim street, the kind where shadows stretched longer than the light, and out of nowhere, her fingers brushed mine before curling around them. It was such a simple gesture, yet it hit me harder than anything else she had done. Her hand was warm, steady, almost protective. I didn't pull away. Instead, I let myself sink into the feeling, into the safety I thought she was offering. That night, I couldn't sleep, replaying the moment again and again, wondering if I had imagined the way her grip tightened as though she never wanted to let go. The truth was, she had become my weakness, and I knew it. I had opened doors I promised myself I would keep locked. I had told her stories no one else would ever hear. I had let her laughter fill the quiet corners of my home, let her voice echo inside my chest when she wasn't around. But more than anything, I had started to believe that maybe she was the answer to the question I had been too afraid to ask: what if I could be loved again? What if someone could look at me, really look, and not turn away? I didn't know that behind her sweetness lived a purpose darker than anything I could imagine. I didn't know that while I was falling deeper into her, she was carrying secrets heavy enough to shatter me. All I knew, in that moment, was that she was the only person who made me feel alive, and that was enough for me to silence the fear that kept clawing at my chest. Because when you've been starved of love, you don't always stop to question whether the hands feeding you are clean. You just take what you're given and hope it won't poison you later. The days that followed seemed to blur into one another, as if she had slipped into my life so naturally that I couldn't remember what it was like without her. At first, it felt harmless, even comforting, to have someone so attentive, so present. She called when she knew I was tired, sent me messages that felt like tiny sparks in my otherwise quiet evenings, and showed up when I least expected it, always with some small excuse that never truly explained why she was there. The truth was, I had stopped questioning it. A part of me had grown addicted to her presence, to the way she seemed to carry warmth into every space she entered, even though there were moments when her warmth felt rehearsed, like a line she had memorized. But I let myself ignore those moments, because her attention felt like oxygen, and I had been suffocating for far too long. She wanted to know me, or at least that's how it seemed. She asked me questions that made me pause, questions that peeled back layers I had kept hidden from the world. She wanted to know what my first heartbreak felt like, how it shaped the way I loved, whether I still carried the weight of that pain in the way I walked through life. She wanted to know about the nights I cried myself to sleep, about the dreams I abandoned because no one believed in me, about the pieces of myself I thought were too broken to share. And I told her. I told her things I had never said out loud. I gave her fragments of my heart that had been locked away, thinking she was carefully holding them, protecting them. She looked at me like I was a mystery she wanted to solve, a book she couldn't put down. And every time she smiled at me, I felt the chains of my loneliness loosen a little more. Yet even in those moments of closeness, there were shadows I couldn't ignore. Sometimes, when she thought I wasn't looking, her face would harden. Her eyes would drift away, distant, as though she wasn't really with me. Other times, her laughter came too easily, as though it was designed to distract me from noticing what she wasn't saying. Once, I caught her looking at me with an expression that didn't feel like affection at all. It felt like calculation, like she was studying me for a reason I couldn't understand. I should have listened to that instinct, but instead, I convinced myself it was my fear talking, the old fear of being hurt again. I reminded myself that she had been nothing but kind, nothing but gentle. So I silenced the doubt, even though it pressed against me like a warning I wasn't ready to hear. As weeks passed, we fell into rhythms that felt too much like love to deny. We shared morning coffee runs that turned into hours of talking, evenings where she cooked in my kitchen like she had been there all along, late nights when we stayed on the phone until sleep blurred our voices. She became the first person I thought of when I woke up and the last person I thought of before I closed my eyes. Every detail of her became a part of my day, the way she teased me when I was serious, the way her eyes softened when I spoke about something painful, the way she leaned closer when I tried to pull away. It felt like she had been designed to fit into the cracks of my life, to slide perfectly into the spaces I didn't even know were emptied. I remember the first time she reached for my hand without hesitation. We were walking along a dim street, the kind where shadows stretched longer than the light, and out of nowhere, her fingers brushed mine before curling around them. It was such a simple gesture, yet it hit me harder than anything else she had done. Her hand was warm, steady, almost protective. I didn't pull away. Instead, I let myself sink into the feeling, into the safety I thought she was offering. That night, I couldn't sleep, replaying the moment again and again, wondering if I had imagined the way her grip tightened as though she never wanted to let go. The truth was, she had become my weakness, and I knew it. I had opened doors I promised myself I would keep locked. I had told her stories no one else would ever hear. I had let her laughter fill the quiet corners of my home, let her voice echo inside my chest when she wasn't around. But more than anything, I had started to believe that maybe she was the answer to the question I had been too afraid to ask: what if I could be loved again? What if someone could look at me, really look, and not turn away? I didn't know that behind her sweetness lived a purpose darker than anything I could imagine. I didn't know that while I was falling deeper into her, she was carrying secrets heavy enough to shatter me. All I knew, in that moment, was that she was the only person who made me feel alive, and that was enough for me to silence the fear that kept clawing at my chest. Because when you've been starved of love, you don't always stop to question whether the hands feeding you are clean. You just take what you're given and hope it won't poison you later. It was strange how quickly the line between pretending and feeling began to blur, though I didn't realize it then. At first, she seemed to know exactly what to say, the right words to comfort me, the right tone to disarm me. It was almost too perfect, and maybe that should have been the warning. But when you are desperate for affection, you don't question perfection, you cling to it, you feed on it, you let it consume you until you forget what silence feels like. That was what she became for me, a constant hum in the background of my life that made loneliness feel like a distant memory. She wasn't supposed to stay, yet she lingered in ways that felt unexplainable, almost obsessive. I noticed it in the way her eyes lingered on me when she thought I wasn't looking, or how her hand brushed mine longer than it needed to. The intensity in her gaze sometimes scared me, but it also pulled me closer. I began to see cracks in her calm exterior. She had been playing the role so well, charming, sweet, effortlessly attentive, but there were moments when I caught her staring at me as if she were fighting a war inside her own head. She would open her mouth as if she wanted to confess something but then stop herself, forcing a smile instead. The more time we spent together, the more I could sense that her presence wasn't just about me anymore. It was as if she was no longer playing a game, no longer following some hidden script, but being pulled into something neither of us could control. I couldn't name it at the time, but it felt like she was falling too, and the weight of that realization terrified me and thrilled me all at once. Our conversations grew deeper, heavier. What started as playful teasing and light stories turned into hours of peeling each other open. She told me about moments of weakness in her own life, about times when she had hurt others, about mistakes she said she regretted. I wanted to believe these were confessions, but sometimes they felt like half-truths, pieces of a larger puzzle she wasn't ready to reveal. Still, I let myself trust them because I wanted to feel like we were equals, like I wasn't the only one spilling my heart. And the more she shared, the closer I felt. Her walls were different from mine, built with secrets rather than pain, but walls nonetheless. And I wanted so badly to be the person she let in. There were nights when her intensity became overwhelming. I remember one evening when we sat across from each other, the air between us charged with something unspoken. She looked at me like she was starving, like every part of her was aching for something she couldn't put into words. I tried to laugh it off, tried to break the tension with some light comment, but she didn't laugh. Instead, she reached across the table and traced her fingers over my wrist, slow and deliberate, as though testing how much of me she could claim without asking permission. My breath caught, and in that moment, the world outside that room disappeared. It wasn't about friendship anymore, wasn't about comfort or companionship. It was something darker, hungrier, something neither of us could deny. She began to haunt me. Even when she wasn't around, I could feel her everywhere. The way her voice echoed in my head when I was alone, the way her scent clung to my clothes, the way the memory of her touch burned on my skin long after it was gone. I started losing sleep, staying awake at night replaying every moment we had shared, wondering what it all meant. I told myself it was just attraction, just a crush I would grow out of, but deep down I knew it was more than that. It was a pull, a gravitational force I couldn't fight no matter how much I tried, but it wasn't only me who was changing. She was too. At first, she was supposed to be the one in control, the one holding all the cards, the one carrying out her mission with cold precision. Yet I could see her slipping. I could see it in the way her voice shook when she said my name, in the way her body leaned closer to mine without realizing it, in the way her laughter sounded different when it was just the two of us, less like performance, more like release. She was unraveling, and it showed. The first time she touched me with real urgency, it wasn't planned. We were sitting in silence, both pretending to focus on something else, but the air was thick with everything unspoken. She reached for me suddenly, her fingers cupping my face, and before I could even process what was happening, her lips brushed mine. It wasn't a careful kiss, it wasn't rehearsed. It was desperate, messy, full of longing she couldn't hold back any longer. My heart stopped, my breath caught, and in that second, I felt the ground shift beneath me. The kiss didn't just steal the air from my lungs, it stole every piece of caution I had left. When we pulled apart, she looked at me with an expression I couldn't understand. There was guilt, yes, but also something fierce, something that felt like possession. Her eyes searched mine as if begging me not to ask questions, not to break the fragile moment we had created. I didn't. I couldn't. All I knew was that nothing between us would ever be the same again. From that night on, everything grew heavier. The laughter, the touches, the conversations, they all carried a weight they hadn't before. She wanted me in ways she couldn't hide anymore, and I wanted her in ways I could no longer deny. It was reckless, dangerous, but it was also intoxicating. She was supposed to be the one to ruin me, but it was clear now that she was the one falling apart. She was breaking the very rules she had come here to follow, and I was too far gone to stop her. What neither of us admitted aloud was that whatever we were building wasn't just desire. It was obsession, raw and consuming. And obsession, I knew, never ended gently. It burned, it destroyed, and it left nothing untouched. Yet in those moments, when her hands trembled against mine and her voice cracked as she whispered my name, I didn't care about the fire. I was ready to let it burn me alive. It happened slowly at first, like the tide creeping onto the shore, but soon it was everywhere, flooding everything I thought I could control. What began as stolen glances and tentative touches grew into something so powerful it left no space for hesitation. The night it finally broke, the night everything between us crossed the line we had both been pretending wasn't there, was a storm of emotion I will never forget. It wasn't just about passion, it was about everything that had been building in silence, every secret we had swallowed, every look that lasted too long. All of it collided in a single moment where holding back became impossible. She kissed me again, but this time there was no hesitation, no trace of guilt holding her back. It was hungry, urgent, like she had been waiting for this from the very beginning. Her hands held my face as if I would disappear if she let go, and I clung to her like I had been drowning for years and she was the only air left. It was chaotic, messy, and yet it felt like the most honest thing we had ever shared. The way she whispered my name that night was different. It wasn't casual, wasn't playful, it was desperate. It sounded like a confession, like a prayer, like she was surrendering to something she no longer had the strength to fight. Every time my name left her lips, I felt it carved deeper into me, leaving marks I knew would never fade. I had never felt wanted like that, never felt the kind of intensity that made the rest of the world vanish. There was no past, no future, no weight of mistakes or secrets, there was only her, and the way her body trembled as though touching me was both terrifying and necessary, but behind every moment of closeness, I could feel something darker. There were times she would pull back, her eyes clouded with something I couldn't name, as if she was remembering why she shouldn't be there, why she wasn't supposed to fall this deep. Yet the very next second, she would return even more fiercely, holding me tighter, kissing me harder, as if punishing herself for every ounce of hesitation. It was as though she was trapped between two worlds, the one that sent her to me and the one she was building with me in secret. And while I didn't yet understand the weight of that conflict, I could feel it every time her touch shifted from gentle to desperate. Nights with her became an addiction. The sound of her voice, the warmth of her hands, the way she lost control when it was just us, I craved it all, even though some part of me knew it was dangerous. She made me feel alive in a way that bordered on madness. She would look at me with a hunger that went beyond desire, as though she wanted to consume not just my body but every part of who I was. And when I gave myself to her, I did it fully, without walls, without barriers. I let her in deeper than anyone had ever been allowed. I should have asked more questions, should have wondered why her eyes sometimes carried guilt instead of joy, but I was too far gone to stop. She began to change in ways I couldn't ignore. The woman who once seemed so calculated, so in control, was now unraveling in front of me. Her touches became reckless, her words slipped from her lips like confessions she couldn't hold back anymore. She would whisper that she needed me, that she couldn't stand the thought of being away from me, that I had become everything she thought she didn't want. Sometimes her voice broke when she said it, like the truth was tearing her apart. And though I didn't understand why she sounded so broken, I couldn't help but cling to those words. For someone like me, who had spent years feeling unwanted, those desperate whispers became the most dangerous comfort. The more she gave in, the more I let myself fall. I found myself living for her calls, for her texts, for the way her arms wrapped around me when I was at my weakest. She had started as a stranger, a shadow in my life, but now she was the center of it, the axis around which everything else turned. And though I should have been wary, though I should have asked why her presence sometimes felt like a secret too heavy to carry, I couldn't bring myself to care. Love, or what I thought was love, had blinded me completely. There were moments, though, when the truth seemed to claw at the edges. Once, as we lay together in the silence that follows passion, I asked her why she had chosen me. It was a simple question, but one that carried the weight of all my insecurities. She hesitated, just for a second, and then she smiled, brushing a strand of hair from my face, and told me she hadn't chosen me at all, that it felt like the universe had pushed her into my life. I wanted to believe her. I needed to. But something in her eyes that night told me the story wasn't so simple. It was a flicker of fear, of guilt, of something I couldn't name, and though I pressed my lips to hers to silence the questions building inside me, the memory of that look stayed with me long after. Still, I let myself sink deeper. The world had never made space for me the way she did, even if her space sometimes felt borrowed, even if her love felt like it came with shadows. I told myself that the way she screamed my name when the walls between us fell must mean something real, something truer than anything else. I told myself that people don't fake that kind of hunger, that kind of need. And maybe that was my biggest mistake, believing that passion was proof of honesty. Because in those moments, when she clung to me as though she would die if I left, I didn't see a woman sent to ruin me. I saw someone broken, someone tangled in her own lies, someone who needed me as much as I needed her. What I didn't realize was that every kiss, every whispered confession, every desperate night together was building toward a truth that would tear everything apart. But for now, I was blind to it. All I knew was the sound of her voice in the dark, the way her touch set fire to every piece of me, and the dangerous hope that maybe, just maybe, I had finally found the kind of love I thought I would never deserve. The fall never comes all at once. It begins with small cracks, almost invisible, until suddenly the ground beneath you gives way and everything you thought was solid turns to dust. That is how I discovered the truth. At first, it was something small, so small I almost brushed it off. She had left her phone on the table one night when she went to the kitchen, and though I wasn't the type to snoop, a message lit up the screen. I shouldn't have looked. I knew it even as my eyes betrayed me and landed on the words. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't personal, but it was enough. It was a reminder of someone else, someone she was answering to. The message was brief, almost coded, but the weight of it pressed against my chest. It said, "Asterisk, is it working? Has she broken yet?" Asterisk, my body went cold. My hand shook. For a second, I thought I must be misunderstanding, that maybe it wasn't about me at all, but deep down I knew. All those questions she asked, all that attention that seemed too sharp, too focused, it hadn't been love at first. It had been intention. I remember sitting there, staring at the glowing screen until the letters blurred, my mind spiraling into pieces. She walked back into the room, smiling like she always did, holding 2 cups of tea, and in that moment I hated her smile. I hated how easy it looked, how warm it seemed, knowing now it had been built on a lie. I wanted to throw the phone at her, demand answers right then, but I froze. I let her sit across from me, watched her sip her tea, watched her laugh at something meaningless, and all the while my heart was breaking with every breath I took. The days that followed were torture. I kept waiting for her to confess, waiting for her to look me in the eyes and admit what I had already seen. But she didn't. Instead, she kept playing her part, only now I could see the cracks everywhere. The way she avoided certain topics, the way she sometimes seemed too eager to know how I was feeling, the way her eyes shifted away when I asked her directly why she cared so much. Everything I had ignored before now screamed at me, and I couldn't silence it anymore. One night, I couldn't hold it in any longer. We were lying together, her arm draped over me, her breath warm against my neck, and I felt sick. Sick because I wanted her, sick because I hated her, sick because the truth had poisoned everything between us. I turned to face her and asked the question that had been burning inside me, "Why are you really here?" At first, she pretended not to understand, her brows furrowing like she was confused. But when I repeated it, sharper this time, her face changed. The mask slipped, if only for a moment, and I saw the truth in her eyes. Guilt. Fear. Shame. She tried to touch me, tried to soften me with her hands and her voice, but I pulled away. I couldn't let her silence me with affection anymore. Her words stumbled out like broken glass, sharp and painful. She admitted there had been a plan, that she hadn't come to me by accident. Someone had sent her, someone who wanted to watch me fall apart, someone who thought I was weak enough to destroy with the right push. She told me at first it was easy, that she could keep her heart out of it, that she was just doing what she was told. But then she said something that made my chest ache even as anger tore through me. She said somewhere along the way, she had stopped following orders. She said she had fallen, that she hadn't meant to but couldn't stop it. She said I wasn't just a target anymore, I was everything. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly, but the words sent to ruin me echoed in my mind like a curse. My hands trembled as I pushed her away, tears burning down my face before I even realized I was crying. How could I separate the truth from the lie? Every touch, every kiss, every whispered confession, were they real, or were they part of the mission? Was the way she screamed my name in the dark a performance, or was it the only truth in this entire mess? The question shredded me from the inside out. I broke that night. I shouted, I cried, I told her to leave, to never come back. She begged, her voice cracking, her hands reaching for me as if she could hold me together while I was falling apart. But nothing she said could erase the words I had seen on that screen, the confirmation that I had been played from the very beginning. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound I had carried before, because this time I had allowed it. I had opened the door myself, handed her the keys to every locked place inside me, and she had walked in carrying poison. When the door finally closed behind her, the silence that filled the room was unbearable. I sat on the floor, my body shaking, my chest tight, the taste of her still on my lips like a ghost I couldn't exorcise. I hated her. I hated how much I loved her. I hated that even knowing the truth, part of me still wanted her to turn around, to walk back in and explain everything away. But she didn't. And for the first time since she had entered my life, I was truly alone again, only this time, it wasn't the comforting silence I had once known. It was a silence heavy with betrayal, a silence that screamed louder than any words could. That night I realized what it meant to be destroyed. It wasn't just about losing someone. It was about losing yourself in them, giving them every part of you, only to discover they were never meant to protect it. They were sent to break it. And the worst part wasn't that she succeeded, it was that she took my heart with her when she left. I told myself I was done with her, that I would never let her step inside my world again. After that night, I shut the door and locked it, not just against her but against every feeling she had awakened inside me. I tried to go back to the way things were before, to the quiet, to the safety of walls I had built so carefully. But it was impossible. She was everywhere. In the way my sheets still carried her scent, in the echoes of her laughter in corners of my house, in the way my body betrayed me by aching for her touch even as my mind screamed against it. Anger was supposed to protect me, but it wasn't enough. I wanted her gone, but I also wanted her here, begging me to believe her. And the war inside me left me sleepless, restless, fragile in ways I couldn't admit to anyone. She didn't stay gone. She never would. The first time she came back, it was pouring rain, and I opened the door to find her standing there, drenched, trembling, her eyes wide with desperation. She didn't ask to come in, she just stood there, like she was waiting for me to decide whether to let her speak or leave her out in the storm. I should have shut the door in her face. I should have protected what little I had left. But instead, I stood frozen, torn between the need to hear her truth and the urge to silence her forever. Finally, I let her in, though my chest burned with resentment the moment she crossed the threshold. Her words poured out quickly, almost frantic. She confessed everything, this time without masks, without pretenses. She told me about the people who had sent her, about how they wanted to see me broken because my strength unsettled them, because my survival made them uncomfortable. She admitted she had agreed, thinking it would be easy, thinking I was just another task she could complete and walk away from. But then she said the thing I didn't know how to process. She said I had undone her instead. She said she had fallen against her will, that every kiss, every late-night whisper, every moment when she screamed my name had been real, even when she didn't want it to be. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her that her love meant nothing after everything she had done, but the way her voice cracked, the way her eyes glistened with tears, held me in place. She wasn't pretending anymore. I could feel the rawness in her words, the vulnerability she had never shown before. It was messy and unpolished, the opposite of the charm she had used when we first met. For the first time, I saw her stripped of control, stripped of games, and I hated myself for the way it pulled at me. Because even though betrayal burned inside me like fire, there was still a part of me that wanted to believe her. We argued, our voices sharp and heavy with everything we had been holding back. I accused her of using me, of playing with my heart, of being nothing more than a liar who had stolen my trust. She didn't deny it. She stood there, taking every word like punishment she knew she deserved. But then she said something that cut through my rage. She said she wasn't asking for forgiveness. She said she just needed me to know that what she felt for me now was real, that she would give up everything to prove it. She begged me not to erase the truth of what we had shared, even if it had been born from a lie. Her desperation left me trembling. I wanted to push her out, to slam the door and never see her again. But my heart betrayed me, just as it always had with her. I remembered the way she had held me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered, the way she whispered my name like it was both a surrender and a promise. Those memories refused to fade, no matter how hard I tried to bury them. And standing there, watching her break in front of me, I realized something I didn't want to admit. I still loved her. That night ended with silence, not resolution. She stayed until the rain stopped, sitting across from me with red eyes and trembling hands, both of us too exhausted to keep fighting. I didn't forgive her. I couldn't. But I didn't send her away either. We sat there in the heavy quiet, bound together by pain and desire, by betrayal and something that still felt dangerously like love. I hated her for what she had done, but I hated myself more for the way I still wanted her, for the way her presence filled the emptiness that had nearly swallowed me whole. When she finally left, the silence didn't feel as sharp as before. It was softer, confusing, filled with questions I didn't want to answer. I lay awake long after, wondering if I had made a mistake by letting her back in even for a moment, wondering if the truth she gave me was enough to balance the lies that had come before. But the image of her standing in the rain, desperate and undone, wouldn't leave me. It haunted me, pressed against me, made me wonder if perhaps the person sent to ruin me was also the only one capable of piecing me back together. And that thought, dangerous as it was, clung to me more tightly than the pain of betrayal ever could. The days after she returned to me were heavier than before. It was as if her confession had cracked something open inside me that I could no longer close, no matter how badly I wanted to. I told myself I wouldn't see her again, that I wouldn't answer if she came back, that I had to rebuild the walls she had broken. But every thought of her was sharper than a knife, cutting through my resolve until I felt like I was living in fragments. I went through the motions of my life as though nothing had happened, but everything had changed. Food had no taste, the silence in my house was unbearable, and the memory of her eyes, wet with tears, filled with a pain that looked too real to be faked, kept me awake at night. I told myself it was weakness, that I was foolish to even consider believing her, but my heart didn't listen. It kept replaying every word, every broken whisper, every trembling breath she had given me in her confession. When she appeared again, I wasn't surprised. I knew she would, because nothing about her had ever stayed away easily. This time, she wasn't standing in the rain, nor did she come with frantic desperation. She was quieter, slower, carrying herself as if she knew she had no right to be here, but couldn't stay away either. She didn't ask to be let in, and yet I stepped aside and allowed her through. The air between us was thick, filled with unspoken things, and we both knew the weight of what sat between us. For a long while, we didn't speak. She sat on the edge of the chair, her hands folded tightly in her lap, while I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, pretending that my heart wasn't trembling with every second she was near. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but low, as though she had practiced the words 100 times before daring to release them. She said she had walked away from the people who had sent her. She said she had burned every bridge, cut every tie, that she no longer belonged to them. And then she looked at me with eyes that carried both fear and hope, and she said she wanted to belong to me instead. The words sent a shiver through me, because they were exactly what I wanted and everything I feared. I wanted her to be mine, but I didn't know if I could trust that she truly was. My mouth opened to ask her how I could ever believe her, how I could ever forget the betrayal, but nothing came out. I was trapped between the ache of wanting her and the wound of knowing what she had done. She stood then, crossed the room, and for the first time in weeks she reached for me. I flinched, my body's instinct pulling away before my heart could stop it. But she didn't let go. Her hands held mine tightly, and her eyes burned into me with a truth I had never seen so clearly before. She said she knew she had ruined me, that she had torn me apart in ways no one else ever had, but she also said she was willing to spend the rest of her life trying to put me back together. She said she didn't want forgiveness handed to her, she wanted to earn it, piece by piece, day by day. She begged me not to shut her out forever, not when what existed between us was too strong to be erased by lies alone. Her words filled the air with fire and silence all at once. I wanted to scream at her for daring to think she could fix me, for daring to think she could mend what she had broken. But I also wanted to fall into her arms and never let go, because every time she touched me, I felt like I belonged somewhere in this world. My body betrayed me before my mind could catch up. I didn't push her away. Instead, I let her hold me, and in that closeness all the anger, all the betrayal, all the longing tangled together until I couldn't separate one from the other. I hated her, I loved her, I wanted to destroy her, I wanted to save her. And in that chaos, I kissed her. The kiss was not tender. It was rough, messy, desperate. It carried every ounce of pain and love we had wrapped ourselves in. Her mouth trembled against mine, not from hesitation but from the weight of everything she had carried. When we finally pulled apart, breathless and unsteady, I could see in her face that she would never let me go again. And though I told myself this was dangerous, that I was setting myself up for another fall, I couldn't deny the truth either. Neither of us knew how to live without the other anymore. That night, she didn't leave. She stayed, curled beside me like she had always belonged there. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning with fear and hope, love and hate, but my body pressed against hers anyway. I told myself it wasn't forgiveness, that it wasn't a second chance, that it was just weakness. But deep down, I knew it was more. I knew I had let her back in, even if I didn't understand why. And as her hand rested gently over my heart, as her breath warmed my skin, I realized that no matter how much she had been sent to ruin me, no matter how much she had broken me, I wasn't ready to live in a world without her. It terrified me to admit it, but the truth was undeniable. Even in the ruins, even in the betrayal, even in the pain, she was still mine, and I was still hers. And whether it saved me or destroyed me again, I couldn't walk away. The morning after felt heavier than the night before. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, warm and golden, but inside me there was nothing simple about it. I lay still, pretending to be asleep, afraid of what it would mean if I opened my eyes and found her watching me. I was terrified of the silence, terrified of the words that might come if either of us dared to break it. Her arm was draped across me, her body pressed close, and every slow rise and fall of her chest against my back was a reminder that she was still here. Not sent by someone else, not a shadow playing a role, but here because she chose to be. I should have pushed her away, should have slipped from her hold before the feelings buried me completely. But instead, I let myself stay there, locked in the comfort of her warmth, because part of me had always ached for this, peace, closeness, the illusion that love could wash away betrayal. When I finally moved, she stirred, her eyes opening slowly, still heavy with sleep. The look she gave me wasn't filled with charm or persuasion like before. It was raw, stripped bare, soft in a way I had never seen. She whispered my name like a prayer, as if she wasn't sure she had the right to say it anymore. For a long moment, I couldn't answer her. My throat was too tight, my heart too unsteady. But when I finally met her gaze, I saw nothing but truth staring back at me, and it broke me in ways anger never had. She didn't try to explain again, didn't rush into apologies or promises. She simply said she loved me, and the way her voice cracked on those words told me she meant them with every piece of herself. The day stretched on in a haze of contradictions. We moved around each other cautiously, speaking little, as if both of us were afraid that words might shatter whatever fragile thread held us together now. Yet every time she brushed against me, every time her fingers lingered just a moment too long, something inside me softened. The walls I had built so high were crumbling, and I hated that I couldn't stop them. I hated that even after everything, her presence made me feel alive again. There was no logic in it, no sense, just the undeniable pull of something deeper than betrayal, deeper than pain. By the evening, it was impossible to hold back the storm. We sat facing each other, the weight of all we hadn't said pressing down on us until I could barely breathe. My voice shook when I asked her why she had agreed to hurt me, why she hadn't walked away before she destroyed what we had. Her eyes filled with tears, and she told me the truth again, her voice breaking as she confessed how lost she had been, how empty, how much she had thought she didn't deserve anything real until I forced her to feel. She said she had been sent to ruin me, but instead I had ruined her lies, her masks, her control. She said I had broken her open, And in that breaking, she had found the only thing in her life that had ever been real. I wanted to resist, wanted to cling to my anger, but the sincerity in her words shattered me. I saw the way she shook as she spoke, the way her hands reached for mine but stopped short, afraid of rejection. I saw the vulnerability in her tears, and for the first time I realized she was as ruined as I was. We had both been torn apart by what had happened, both bleeding from wounds we didn't know how to heal. And maybe that was why I finally gave in, why I reached out and pulled her to me, why I let my lips find hers again even though every rational part of me screamed against it. Because if we were ruined, then maybe we could only be put back together by each other. The kiss was different this time. It wasn't violent with anger, nor trembling with fear. It was steady, deep, filled with a kind of surrender I didn't know I was capable of. Her arms wrapped around me tightly, as if she would never let me go again, and I clung to her just as fiercely, because I knew I didn't want her to. For the first time, I stopped fighting what my heart had been telling me all along. She had hurt me, yes, but she had also changed me, awakened me, burned me alive in ways no one else ever had. And even in the ashes, I couldn't deny that I still loved her. We spent that night together without barriers, without lies, without anything to shield us from the truth of what we were. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't clean or easy. It was messy, raw, complicated, full of both tenderness and desperation. But it was real. Every touch, every whispered breath, every broken sound in the dark carried more weight than any apology ever could. It was proof that despite the ruin, despite the betrayal, despite everything that should have driven us apart, we still belonged to each other in a way that defied reason. Lying in her arms after, I felt the fear again, the fear of what loving her meant, of what it could cost me, of how easily she could break me once more. But alongside the fear was something stronger, something I hadn't felt in so long: hope. Hope that maybe love wasn't about safety, about walls and control. Maybe it was about risking everything, about choosing to believe even when belief could destroy you. And as her fingers traced gentle patterns on my skin, as her lips pressed soft promises against my shoulder, I realized that for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the ruin anymore. Because if ruin was the price of this love, then I would pay it again and again. I closed my eyes, letting myself fall into her warmth, knowing the world outside us would never understand, that they had sent her to break me, to crush me, to see me destroyed. But they had failed. Because in trying to ruin me, they had given me the one thing I never thought I'd find, the one person who could burn me down and still be the only place I wanted to stay. And in her arms, I wasn't broken anymore. I was whole, even in the wreckage, because she was mine and I was hers, and nothing else mattered.